order to make the flow meter and the solenoid valve work with our ARO controller, we're now going to power on the controller. Once powered on, you will see that we land at the language selection page. We'll select English and head to the home screen. We'd now want to select the units that we want to use for our process. To do that, we'd want to go to the setup menu, enter the default password 27632, and under general setup, you'd want to scroll down and go into units and choose the units that you'd want to use for the process. In this case, we'd say we'd like to use gallons. Next step would be to select a pump sensor, and to do that, we go into pump setup and go into the pump sensor menu. You have three options: a pressure sensor, a proximity sensor, and a flow meter. Select flow meter, and that lets the controller know that we are interfacing the flow meter with the controller. Next step is to calibrate the flow meter. In order to calibrate, we'd go into the setup menu and enter pump setup and scroll all the way down to find the calibration screen. Calibration provides you with two options: auto calibration and manual calibration. To give you an example, let's try manual calibration. Once we enter the manual calibration menu, the controller wants to see a calibration factor in the units of pulses per gallon. Most manufacturers of flow meters provide the calibration factor, or a K factor. In our case, it happens to be 423 pulses per US gallon, and we will enter that and hit OK. So that completes the manual calibration of the flow meter. We'll now take a test run of how to get the flow meter working and the solenoid valve open. Easiest way to complete an operation in terms of transferring a batch from one tank to the other would require us to go into the quick start menu, and we'd launch the quick start menu with this button. We can now begin the process by hitting begin run, and as you can notice, you see that the solenoid valve is open, and we can see the readout of the actual flow through the flow meter. And to stop the solenoid or close the solenoid valve, we hit stop. And that's the easiest way to get started with a flow meter and a solenoid valve combination with the ARO controller. Let's now take a look at how to work with the auto calibration mode. To do that, we'd want to go to the setup menu, enter the default password 27632 unless it's not changed. Enter pump setup, go into calibration, and select auto calibration. What auto calibration lets us do is pump a desired quantity of fluid into a container, preferably a calibrated container or a cylinder. Once we've pumped a desired quantity, we'd want to then come back to the controller and enter the actual quantity of fluid pumped. The controller then takes the difference, if any, and performs calculations in order to calibrate the flow meter. Let's go ahead and start the pump in order to pump the quantity of fluid. To begin, press start pump. We'll stop the pump when we hit the 1 gallon mark in the calibrated cylinder. we now measure the calibrated cylinder and measure the quantity of fluid present in the cylinder or the bucket. Once the quantity is known, we enter the actual volume. In our case, it is 1.25 gallons, and select complete. The controller has now performed calculations with the actual quantity in the bucket, and the calibration process is complete.